if you are not part of the elite, then whether you are being exploited or whether you are irrelevant, I don't like those options. I would like to increase my
Yeah,
options.
certainly, but still, there is a big difference between exploitation and irrelevance.
Yes.
When you're exploited, you're still powerful. You're
You're
necessary.
powerful as long as to be exploited.
Yeah,
your
but,
power
but,
is in your
but
exploitation.
they need you. I mean, if you're exploited, for example, you go on strike, and they care about it because they need you. They need you to work in the factory or to serve in the
Yeah.
army. When you're irrelevant, you are much less powerful. Irrelevant people can't go on strike. I mean, if they go on strike, who cares?
No, you can't go on strike, but you do need to organise. Now, this narrative, the narrative where the worker is central because the worker is necessary. This narrative is constructed not out of politeness, but merely in order to exploit the worker. And whilst you may have a personal sense of engagement of, hey, I'm like that guy with a sheaf of wheat or holding a sickle, ain't life grand, you still are simply a resource. Now,
But again, you are an important resource
because
and
you have purpose, you're saying on a spiritual
yeah,
level.
No. I mean, from the point of view of the political and economic system, you are important.
Yes.
And the fact is, they do invest in you. Even if you live in a place like Nazi Germany, as long as you're not a Jew or something like that, Hitler would invest in your health, in your education, would build sewage systems in the slums, because Hitler needs you, eventually, to work in the factory and to serve as a soldier in the Wehrmacht. Otherwise, Germany won't be strong. So even
And
the
also,
most...
within fascism, aside from the obvious the things about fascism that don't need to be rehashed because they're so sort of evidently abominable, the positive thing about fascism, the idea about us human beings functioning as a unit, that is not a lie. It's not an exploitation. That's not exploitative in the same way as a capitalist system exploits people by selling the deception, oh, why don't we work, it'll be good, when really it's entirely your labour is a resource for us. In fascism, isn't there a sense that there is an earnest belief that the included group are valuable? It's not insincere. You're not being duped or probably Hitler wasn't going, ha 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 ha, those stupid blonde, blue-eyed. He means it. It's sincere.
That's a big question. I mean, it's when you look at the fact, it's really a myth. But certainly there is
What do you mean? The sincerity of fascism, or
the sincerity of fascism, of really caring about the individual German housewife and her children.
Still just a means to mobilise a population to suit the needs of the powerful.
In the end, I mean, you see it in fascism like in many other regimes. And of course, there are always the excluded ones.
Yes.
Fascism, in order to function, fascism always needs enemies and traitors.
Just
and
cross fascism off my list of potential ideas.
I mean, again, there is a lot of misunderstanding about fascism, which is, I think, one of the reasons you see a resurgence of certain fascist tendencies today in the world.
Do you think one of the misunderstandings is that there's a kind of romanticism for the included group, and if you have enough dispossessed
it's just
people...
the opposite. That I think that when we tried to, and after the Second World War, it was a central theme in every education system in the West. To warn people about fascism. But I think we didn't do a good enough job because we presented fascism as a kind of monster. And we vilified, we didn't explain what was attractive about it. And what was attractive about fascism is that it told people, if you belong to the group, to the right group, you are the most important thing in the world. You are the most beautiful thing in the world. When people looked, like in the fascist mirror in the 1930s, if an Aryan looked in the mirror, he did not see a monster. He saw the most beautiful thing in the world. This is why it was so attractive.
Comparable to the worker in the wheat sheaf propaganda poster, you have an identity that is meaningful to your culture. Your individual identity has value in the collective identity, whether that's you're an Aryan looking in the mirror or you're a communist toiling in the fields or factory. You have purpose, you have meaning. This seems to be a resource that's important when organising a society or a system.
Yeah, and it flatters people. People
more
like
than-
to hear that
and
they
also
are...
it's a sort of a human resource, isn't it? I mean, when we're looking at, see, it's difficult, isn't it, when talking about extremist ideologies such as fascism and communism as we've experienced it, because as you just said, we don't include what must be attractive about it, and there is nothing wrong with people feeling purpose or valued in the collective. There is something wrong with people persecuting an outside
Exactly,
group.
but because we made this, we wanted to warn people about fascism. We didn't really explain what was so tempting about it. Why did people go after it? It's a bit like, when I read Harry Potter or when I watch Star Wars or things like that, they always make the same mistake. That they depict the bad guys as just terrible and ugly and repulsive. And then you're left with the sense, why would anybody follow Voldemort? Why would anybody follow Darth Vader? These guys, they are ugly, they are mean, even to their own supporters. They are mean and cruel. And then you don't understand what is seductive about the dark side. And the thing is, the dark side is very seductive because for the people in it, it's very beautiful.
Yes.
Again, you look in the mirror, you see the most beautiful thing in the world. This is something that, traditional Christian art understood much better than modern science fiction.
You mean that the devil would be beautiful?
The devil is beautiful. Otherwise, who would be tempted? So now we have an entire generation that grew up with the idea of fascism is the ugliest thing in the world. And then when they start to adopt fascist ideas and they look in the mirror, what they see is not a monster. What they see is something very beautiful. And then they reach the conclusion, we can't be fascists.
Yes, I understand. When you want people to be vegetarian, you can't say bacon tastes awful. You have to go, look, bacon's great, but we just can't eat it, okay? And the same with drugs. Look, heroin, it's a lot of fun, but just, I'm sorry, we can't take heroin anymore. It's off the agenda. And what those things are resourced by is pleasure, power. These energies are attractive. All these ideologies, they move through our consciousness, no? They all have at some point interacted with human consciousness. They are an expression of our consciousness. They seem to be universals. There seem to be perennial themes that are emerging. We want to belong to the collective. We want to feel value. We want to feel purposeful. Antithetical, in fact, to the dystopia that you're describing, where a useful class will inflate and to an unmanageable degree. Isn't it then, when we're looking at the systems that have failed and the systems that are succeeding and what we have learned and what we're beginning to understand, isn't it our obligation to begin to present alternative ideas that somehow embrace these ideas of purpose, essence, and where possible, throw off the imaginary shackles of the system's pre-existing requirements, i.e. your value is as a worker. Every single one of us in this room right now is here because of our value as a worker. You, me, Jenny, every single person here is being paid to be here, right? One way or another. And you love your husband. Thank God your husband's in the room, but you've already admitted he's come up with all the best ideas. So but none of us, or the most important things in my life are not my values as a man doing a podcast. My children, my wife, and all human beings know this, that love is something that can be realized through work, but need not be, and often isn't.